Good afternoon, everyone. This is Dr. Ryan Truchelut of WeatherTiger. It is exactly 1:30 p.m. Eastern Time, and I'm tracking the very latest with Category 4 Hurricane Milton on final approach to the west central Florida coastline. I'm going to give the audience just a couple minutes to come in, find the video, and then I will get started talking about what's going on right now in terms of rain, tornado, wind impacts across the state, as well as the forecast for a very dangerous next 24 hours ahead. So I'll be right back in about 2 minutes. All right, everyone, let's get started. My name is Dr. Ryan Truchelut. I'm a hurricane scientist, researcher, and forecaster. I've been at this for about 20 years of operational hurricane forecasting, and days like these are all too frequent, but they're still incredibly dangerous and destructive and frightening days. Category 4 Hurricane Milton. This is a visible satellite imagery looking down from space, and we can see a very powerful hurricane is imminently about to make landfall on the west central Florida coastline. I'm going to walk you through all the surge, the wind, the rain impacts, what's going on now, what we can expect over the next 24 hours. So let's get right into it. This is the National Hurricane Center forecast track as of the 11 a.m. advisory. Maximum sustained winds with Milton are 145 miles per hour movement, northeast at 17 miles per hour. We're now closing into Milton is getting very close to the west central Florida coastline. At this current rate of motion, Milton will make landfall within the next 10 hours, so by midnight tonight. Somewhere in that range between Tampa Bay and Charlotte Harbor, basically. Those are your goalposts. Most likely landfall point in this advisory somewhere in that Sarasota-ish vicinity. Um, we haven't really seen a lot of changes from the National Hurricane Center track. They've been very steady. There's been maybe just a ever so slight south shift in the last 24 hours, but not much of one. National Hurricane Center is also putting out hourly tropical cyclone updates to update people on the position and intensity of Hurricane Milton. And as of 1 p.m., Milton is now passing 145 miles to the west of Fort Myers, and it's about 160 miles southwest of Tampa. Sustained wind still Category 4 intensity, 145 miles per hour. Movement still northeast at 35 degrees at 17 miles per hour. Minimum pressure 935 millibars. Filling slowly, but not all that, not fast enough. So we'll talk more about what that movement means and how we can expect things to play out over the next 12 hours here going forward. I don't want to spend very long talking about the forecast. I want to be focused on impacts today because we're down to the nitty gritty. This is the last 12 hours before landfall, and Milton will be moving over West Central Florida by midnight tonight, and Central Florida, North Central Florida in the overnight hours tonight into early Thursday. This is water vapor satellite imagery looking down from space. This gives us a good perspective on where it's wet and where it's drier in the kind of the mid levels of the atmosphere, so 2 to 4 miles up. That gives us a good sense of storm structure with powerful Hurricane Milton here. And it also shows us this big area of drier air off over the central and western Gulf of Mexico. And we can see, based on how the changes in Milton's appearance today, if you looked at Milton last night or 12 hours ago, it had a very well defined what we would call a pinhole eye. The eye was very clear, very visible on the water vapor satellite imagery. It's not anymore, and the reason is you can see all these clouds. You can see kind of Milton's outflow is hitting a wall right about here because there's strong upper level winds out of basically blowing from west to east across the Gulf of Mexico as Milton gets further north. So it's not a classic looking hurricane anymore, but it's still a very, very strong one, Category 4 intensity. These powerful hurricanes tend to follow their outflow. You can see all that outflow is spreading out to the northeast and then to the east. And that's exactly where Milton is going to track. It's going to track right across southern portions of West Central Florida, and then they move across East Central Florida in the overnight hours. So key to those kind of changes that we're seeing, this is wind shear. Regions that are in blue and green are lower wind shear. Oranges and reds are higher wind shear. And Milton is basically moving out of a lower shear environment into a higher shear environment. So that's shear is unfavorable for hurricanes. It makes them kind of spread out. The vortex at the center kind of starts to tilt off to the right as you go up in the atmosphere as it encounters this wind shear. So that's only going to get stronger as it approaches the coastline. And that's going to lead to some structural changes where we're likely to see the maximum sustained winds decline a little bit, but that's really not necessarily weakening in this case because interaction with these fast upper level winds is also going to spread out the existing wind field, make it broader, and it also lowering those maximum sustained winds just a touch. If it comes down to a Category 3 at landfall, as the Hurricane Center predicts, it's not going to change the surge impacts because those have a lot more to do with how strong it was 12 hours ago or 24 hours ago. So don't expect the surge impacts to come down, even as Milton broadens out going into the overnight hours. So there we go. So the next thing I want to show you, we have Hurricane Hunter aircraft flying around through Milton. They're getting a real-time look at how strong this storm is and where it is and where it's moving. So each of these white dots that you see on the map here, that is a place where the Hurricane Hunter aircraft flew through the center and they found the center of circulation. So connecting these white dots shows you the direction that Milton's eye is moving. And the direction that it's moving through the morning and early afternoon hours is slightly north of northeast at a heading of about 30 or 35 degrees. So actually the plane just crossed the center one more time here. So we'll have a fresh read on what that storm motion is. But I do want to emphasize that as we're looking forward over the next 12 hours, we're likely to see this northeast track initially and then bending more towards the east-northeast as we approach landfall, bringing the center of circulation somewhere into the Bradenton or the Sarasota or perhaps the Venice area, maybe as far south as Inglewood, and maybe as far north as Tampa Bay. We're going to have to be tracking this tick by tick. If you're watching this from Tampa Bay, while the NHC forecast track is to the south of you, and that's great, if the forecast track goes to the south, you will have significant rain impacts, you'll have significant wind impacts, but you won't have the high-end surge that you would if the center went over or south of you. But you're not out of the woods yet, because that vector, that motion heading of 30 or 35 degrees, if that was to continue through landfall 10 hours from now, it's a heading of about 40 degrees to get to Anna Maria Island here at the mouth of Tampa Bay. It's heading of about 50 degrees to get over to Sarasota here. So heading of 30 or 35 degrees, we're expecting that bend back to the east But Tampa is not out of the woods. You are in what I would call wobble range of the center moving directly over you. So we'll have to be watching that in real time, monitoring tick by tick how far Milton can make it north during the afternoon hours today. So I want to start talking about what's going on right now because conditions are already deteriorating across the Florida Peninsula. We have this is a radar loop of the last approximately an hour and a half worth of radar. You can see Milton's eye out here and still in the Gulf of Mexico. And those reds and oranges right around the center of Milton, that's where those Category 4 winds are located, right in that eye wall. But we have lots of powerful bands that are already reaching the southwest Florida coastline. And each of these little red boxes is a tornado warning that's ongoing right now because these outer bands, there's a lot of spin embedded within each of these cells, and each of these tornado warned cells is producing a tornado. I know there's been lots of pictures and reports of tornadoes on the ground across South Florida this morning, or very quickly could produce a tornado at any time. So if you're in the tornado warned area, please take shelter immediately in an interior room. Further to the north, these yellows and darker greens, we're not having tornadoes embedded in the rainfall here from Tampa into Orlando, but that's very heavy rainfall, and it's just getting started. That's going to continue for another perhaps 12 to 18 hours across a lot of that region. So let's talk about the surge because the surge is what's going to do the most damage with this hurricane. National Hurricane Center plot here, what's shown is what's called the reasonable worst case scenario. So there's about a 10% chance of exceeding these surge values shown on this map. It's somewhere we'll get these high end amounts, but not everywhere. In the Nature Coast, you're out of the woods. You're going to be out of the woods very shortly in terms of surge because Milton is not going to make it this far north, and if you're on the northern side of the circulation, you're not going to get the worst of the surge. Tampa Bay, reasonable worst case is still 8 to 12 feet of surge. Anna Maria Island, as I said, it's a 40-degree heading. If Milton keeps moving at a 40-degree heading for the next 8 to 10 hours, it'll make landfall here at the mouth of Tampa Bay. And because of that, those reasonable worst case values of 8 to 12 feet, still very much on the table for Tampa Bay. Likely the worst hit region for surge is going to be the section of coast from the mouth of Tampa Bay south to the northern edge of Charlotte Harbor. 10 to 15 feet of storm surge expected in this area. We're talking Bradenton, Sarasota, Venice, and Inglewood. 10 to 15 feet of storm surge is not something that you have seen in over 100 years in these areas. This is basically Ian level surge shifted somewhere between 35 and 75 miles to the north. And you just have to get out of these lower lying areas. If you're listening to me from a lower lying area, if you're under 15 feet of elevation above sea level in this region of Bradenton, Sarasota, Venice, Inglewood, places between there, get to higher ground because your life is in danger right now. This surge is coming. It doesn't matter if Milton is a Category 3 as it makes landfall or not. Reducing the category doesn't help us here because it has a long time of very strong winds over the Gulf of Mexico, long fetch of those onshore winds, and that's going to drive that wall of water onshore no matter what. Charlotte Harbor, 8 to 12 feet of storm surge. Huge surge coming into Charlotte Harbor. West side of Charlotte Harbor will probably have as bad surge as Ian, since Ian went right through Charlotte Harbor. Areas further south, 5 to 8 feet still expected out of Fort Myers, south to Naples, Marco Island area as well. So very significant surge there, and very significant surge expected on the Atlantic side with those onshore winds tomorrow morning. 3 to 5 feet of surge across east central Florida and going north into coastal Georgia as well. So just as an illustration of who is going to get the worst of this surge, this is a model-derived GFS wind field. Estimated landfall time here on the GFS somewhere in that Bradenton, Sarasota area, sometime around 11 o'clock tonight. This is the wind field, and look at those eye wall winds piling water off the continental shelf. Nowhere for that water to go but up onto land, up into Charlotte Harbor, and through that section of the west central Florida coastline. And if this shifts just a bit north, that onshore flow would come into Tampa Bay as well. So that's where we're talking about. It's Southwest Florida, and then additionally, going in later through the morning hours of Thursday, that onshore flow into the Atlantic beaches causing significant surge there as well. And I know we're watching, so we're still on the hook here in Tampa. We're not out of the woods yet in terms of potentially that track getting as far north as the mouth of Tampa Bay. It's something we're watching very carefully. This is a little product that each of these dots is a place where the reconnaissance aircraft got a pass through the center. You can also see overlaid with radar. That eye wall is very close to that center line of the NHC forecast track right now. It was running a little bit left earlier today. Those wobbles have a way of evening out with time. Nevertheless, we're very close to that center line of the NHC track, that black line, which is currently taking the center of Milton right over the Sarasota region, Sarasota Bradenton area overnight tonight. So we'll keep watching this. I'll be doing a live blog here, weathertiger.com, coming up here, starting very soon, starting at the 2 o'clock hour, and we'll be watching Milton's progress tick by tick through the day. Pivoting to talk about winds, this is a major wind risk too for a large portion of central Florida. This area outlined in purple, that's your highest risk region for getting wind gusts of 110 miles an hour or greater, associated with when the eye wall of Milton comes ashore. If it comes ashore kind of in this area, I might even look to the northern side of that eye to be the place where the heaviest, the strongest wind gusts are, simply because I think we're going to be working some dry air into the southern half of the storm, and it may be the northern eye wall that is stronger in this case. So we're watching for that in Tampa, St. Petersburg, Lakeland. Even if you miss the surge, the worst of the surge in Tampa Bay, you will not necessarily miss the worst of the wind with that wind field bias north. These areas in red, including Orlando, Melbourne, and I think I'd also add in, I think, a little bit further north up here on the northeast Florida coastline. These are areas that are at risk for hurricane force wind gusts greater than 74 miles per hour. I think we're probably heading for a strong tropical storm or low end hurricane force wind gusts in the Orlando area through those overnight and early morning hours tonight. Areas of South Florida further south, these areas in yellow and orange, areas where tropical storm force wind gusts are most likely. That's true kind of going into north central Florida as well. Although I do think that this area highlighted in orange, 50 to 70 mile per hour wind gusts are pretty likely in there, especially with that wind field maybe being stronger on the northern than the southern half of the storm. So do keep an eye out in Ocala, Gainesville, and Jacksonville for those 50, 60, even 70 mile per hour wind gusts. What we're seeing right now in terms of wind, these are live wind observations from across the state. Seeing a lot of tropical storm force wind gusts already along the southwest and west central Florida coastlines. But all those stronger winds associated with Milton's core remain offshore, as you can see from the radar. And again, this is kind of just an estimate of what that wind field looks like. It's these areas that are kind of in brown and white and pink. That's your area of the hurricane force wind gusts. And you can see that area is starting to expand out towards the coastline. Tropical storm force wind gusts already on shore from Tampa south into the Everglades. And as this storm moves northeast, we'll be seeing these hurricane force winds move towards shore during the late afternoon hours, maybe even the mid-afternoon hours going forward here. This is what one of our best hurricane models, American Hurricane Model, HAFS shows for the wind field. These areas in purple are hurricane force winds. Areas in green and yellow are tropical storm force. HAFS does think that wind shear is going to weaken the storm as it approaches Bradenton or Sarasota tonight. It's got landfall right around midnight in that area. But look at the expansion of the winds through the day today as we go forward with time, getting bigger as it goes towards land. And then even though that core is breaking down pretty quickly as Milton moves inland, still looking at significant areas of tropical storm and even hurricane force wind gusts straight through the morning hours as it moves back offshore near Cape Canaveral or just south of there sometime in the morning tomorrow. This large area of northeast winds on the north side of the storm that's enhanced by an interaction with the jet stream is going to be doing some damaging winds here in the east central Florida, northeast Florida coastlines as well. Finally, rain is another major concern. These areas highlighted in orange and red, 8 to 15 inches of rainfall in those areas. Highest rain totals, I think, are going to be along and north of I-4, as I said yesterday. South Florida, a lot less rainfall, just a couple inches here for the southern third of the state, with that dry air working around the southern half of the storm and kind of ending your precipitation later today. But the rainfall is expected to continue in that I-4 corridor, even up into north central Florida into the morning hours tomorrow. High risk of flash flooding associated with those 10 or 15-inch rainfall totals along and north of the I-4 corridor. Those are pushing Ian level rains. So we're going to be looking at urban and flash flooding, a major concern, but also a long-lasting river flooding event. Do you remember what happened after Ian in the St. Johns Basin? Those water levels were at flood stage for several months afterwards. And the reason for that is that we're already looking at high water levels across the state, some rivers near or already exceeding flood stage across the state from Helene's rains and a wet pattern over the last week. The last 3 days, this is rainfall totals of what we've seen since Sunday. And we've got a lot of areas over east central Florida already that are looking at anywhere from 1 to 4 inches of rainfall. Southwest Florida coast picking up 3 to 6 right along the coast as well, just to date. And this is live radar. You can see heavy rainfall already setting in across west central Florida. More sporadic rainfall with those tornado cells moving across South Florida. So you're not seeing steady heavy rain, but you are seeing intermittent thunderstorms and tornado warned cells across South Florida. So keep an eye on that. But it's this region, again, along and north I-4 where we're already seeing that heavy rainfall. And it's going to be continuing over the next, I'd say, 12 to 18 hours across the region, exacerbating those flood risks. So do not drive into flood water of any depth. That's a real killer in situations like this. And just looking at what the HAFS model shows for precipitation, and that big band approaching or moving across southwest Florida in the afternoon, moving across southeast Florida in the evening hours. But it's those steadier, heavier rains north of the core of Milton as it comes into that Sarasota area. You can see this is around 1 a.m., 4 a.m., 7 a.m. Heavy overnight rainfall, rain rates exceeding a couple inches an hour right along that I-4 corridor and just north. That's where those flooding rain risks are going to be. Just wanted to check here to make sure I'm not missing any new developments from the Hurricane Center while I've been talking. I haven't. See, I'm going to take any questions that I see. Yeah, again, this is not a storm for North Florida or the Panhandle, or we'll get some light rain in the Big Bend north to Tallahassee, but nothing serious, nothing significant. This is storm of the century for this region from Tampa Bay south to Charlotte Harbor. I'll highlight the region. This is where landfall is going to happen sometime in the 10 o'clock midnight hour, and this motion east-northeast across the state through the overnight hours. It's that region there. The surge is coming if you're along or south of that where that center tracks. So I'll be watching it tick by tick today on the live blog weathertiger.com. So check it out, tune in. I'll be going through landfall and until this storm is well inland. All right, stay safe, Florida. Keep watching the skies, and I'll be with you all through the storm. Take care.